Imagine being told you're heading to prison. Pretty nerve-wracking, right? Well, imagine being so powerful that you could dictate every detail of what this prison would really look like. Sounds very unreal, right? Unfortunately, for most of us, it is, and the people who definitely aren't watching a video like this. But every now and then, someone manages to twist fate in their favor, bending the law and rules to suit their own desires. That list of people is incredibly short. One of the most notorious names on it, Pablo Emilio Escobar. Many would argue that The Godfather needs no introduction, given the sheer amount of content, TV shows, documentaries, and books that have explored his life in harrowing detail. However, to truly understand how Pablo Escobar ended up in a unique and perplexing five-star prison of his own design, first, we need to explore the context of Escobar's situation that led to this bizarre and fascinating outcome. Pablo, before the notoriety. Pablo Emilio Escobar was born into a humble family that moved to Envigado, Colombia. His mother worked as a school teacher, and his father was a farmer, an upbringing that might suggest a simple life of modest means. However, life has a way of shaping people, and sometimes people become products of their environment. For Escobar, this meant being drawn into a life of crime. Escobar's criminal journey began long before he landed in prison. As a teenager, while still in high school, he engaged in petty crimes to make money. It started with smaller schemes, like forging high school diplomas, but quickly escalated. He moved on to selling fake lottery tickets, smuggling stereo equipment, stealing cars, and even selling stolen tombstones after sanding off the inscriptions. His portfolio of crimes grew quickly, showing early signs of his ingenuity and ruthlessness. By 1974, Escobar's criminal exploits caught up to him when he was arrested for car theft, his first arrest. However, this would barely scratch the surface of his criminal career. It was just the beginning of a much larger, darker story. The early rise of the cocaine king. In the 70s, Colombia was experiencing an industry growth that would, unfortunately, become a defining characteristic of Colombia. Thanks to its proximity to the neighboring countries of Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador, Colombia was now becoming the cocaine capital. Escobar has never been considered an idiot, and he seized on this moment. Escobar grew with the industry, initially as a smuggler of this potent and dangerous drug. Then, in the mid-70s, he founded the Medellín cartel with the Ochoa brothers, Juan Jorge Luis, David, and Fabio. He was their leader naturally, and they began to focus on the production, transportation, and sale of cocaine. They were ambitious and had a plan to become the biggest cartel in the world. Their ambitions would serve them well, considering the early successes that made them the biggest cartel in the mid-80s. The United States, a faithful customer. The United States' relationship with narcotics isn't a pleasant one. In fact, it's downright toxic. However, the war on drugs is one they'd been fighting for a few years at this point, thanks to Richard Nixon. He gave it a title and the gravitas to propel it to the national circuit, even though it had been around since the early 20th century. America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive. While the war on drugs was and has remained a controversial aspect of American history in the late 20th century, its staying power has lingered. Presidents long after Nixon continued this war, making it almost a part of the First Family's agenda, regardless of political affiliation. This war wasn't necessarily in response to cocaine, but it encompassed all drugs. The only problem? America was the biggest customer of Pablo Escobar, who incidentally sold drugs. Lots of them. The cocaine craze in America. It's not that cocaine was new to the States. It was in Coca-Cola back in the late 19th century until it was forever dropped in 1903. But the country's relationship with the drug changed in 1914 when the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act was passed into law, regulating the sale of most narcotics, including cocaine. The perception of cocaine shifted over the course of the 20th century. It became known as a poor people's drug or a minority's drug. To say there was an agenda would be an understatement. But that notion is debunked by researchers discovering that 90% of U.S. banknotes had traces of cocaine attached to them. After the passing of the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act, the sale and proliferation of cocaine in America were drastically reduced. For a while, it was considered a thing of the past, but crack doesn't crack. Well, you know what we mean. The 60s, a comeback for cocaine. Come the 60s, things were about to take a drastic backslide. Why? Well, I guess we have the Beatles, Abbey Road, and the iconic Woodstock Music Festival to thank for being the catalyst for drug use in America, reaching its highest levels in decades. The timing couldn't be better for a young Escobar who embarked on a mission, one which he'd succeed in, smuggling drugs en masse to the United States of America. The perception of cocaine was rapidly changing from the drug of the fringe to a party drug with an image of wealth, glamour, and that good old 70s disco. So who was behind this effective marketing campaign? None other than the cocaine king himself, Pablo Escobar. Thanks to America's insatiable appetite for his narcotics, Escobar became a millionaire by the mid-70s with around $3 million. There was no slowing down. Their operations expanded at an accelerated pace. More equipment, routes, manpower, airplanes, and more would put Escobar on a path to becoming a billionaire in no time. The war on drugs meets the cocaine king. He'd reinvented the wheel, made cocaine a party drug, a Wall Street drug, the rich man's drug, the everyday man's drug. People couldn't get enough of it. America may have been in a war with drugs, but America didn't seem to see it that way. For the sake of our children, I implore each of you to be unyielding and inflexible in your opposition to drugs. Our young people are helping us lead the way. Not long ago in Oakland, California, I was asked by a group of children what to do if they were offered drugs. And I answered, just say no. Back home, Escobar was seen as a hero to his community, whom he constantly helped. Sure, he was a violent killer who ran a criminal organization, but money talks. And boy, Escobar's banker can't have a mouthful. An uncontrollable beast. Escobar had become so connected to Colombia's political leaders that it was clear after Galan's assassination that they'd become a cartel beyond control, existing not just outside the law but above it. A new government came into power and crafted the 1991 Constitution. And in that Constitution was a point that made extradition of Colombians to any country, including the United States, a no-go. It's easy to see Pablo's influence on the country's Constitution. Money and fear talk, and when they do, politicians listen. Escobar had made a surprising yet not surprising deal with the Colombian government. He turned himself in and remained locked up for a period of 5 years. But he had one major condition. He didn't want to live like a prisoner. Far from it, actually. A prison fit for the cocaine king. Escobar had a lot of money and the means to make a palace, or in this case, a prison, fit for a king. The prison he'd go on to create for his 5-year confinement would end up being nicknamed Club Medellín, or more commonly known as Hotel Escobar. The interior of this prison resembled that of a 5-star hotel. No expense was spared, and considering he'd spend 5 years of his life there, it made sense. He created a prison with multiple rooms, an expansive kitchen, and stunning, lavish living rooms, dining rooms, and entertainment areas. Hotel Escobar was located on a mountaintop, a location he chose himself after seeing it while on a hike with his brother. It was difficult to reach, and this was by design. The conditions of the mountain, with rough terrain and constant fog, meant that he was well protected, a luxury not usually associated with a prisoner. Their safety typically isn't a concern in prisons. Escobar even had telescopes to make sure he could see if anyone was approaching from far away and had a view of his surroundings to detect more immediate intruders. The prison itself had high walls and barbed wire fences. Better yet, the prison was well stocked with weapons and ammunition. Maybe it should have been called Fort Escobar instead of Hotel Escobar. Sure, the outside was prison-like, but the inside was a whole different ball game. No, literally. There was a soccer pitch. Escobar was an avid fan of the sport, so he made sure there was a field to facilitate some games. Pablo even had the audacity and power to invite the Colombian national team to his prison for a game. The '91 team actually took him up on the offer. Escobar fed the players like royalty. They played a game, humored the dangerous cartel boss, who was nowhere near as in shape or as skilled as them, and were treated well into the night, with a disco because he had a room with a dance floor. Sounds like the strangest night in a prison anyone's ever had. He even celebrated his 45th birthday with friends and family at his lavish home. I mean, prison, and treated them to expensive food, quality entertainment, and a good time. To emphasize the size of this palace would be to mention the numerous party rooms, which were specifically designed for guests to enjoy billiards, watch sports, or relax. Not many people can say they've had a great time in prison, but if you were friends with Escobar and managed to get an invite, you were one of the few. Escobar even invited models to Hotel Escobar, because why not? The idea that Escobar was in prison is one that's hard to get behind, considering the reality behind his years at Hotel Escobar. When there are so many luxury items like saunas, jacuzzis, a gym, a pool, a soccer field, a dance floor, lavish rooms, entertainment rooms with endless models and escorts, and friends and family coming to the mountain through the fog, you can't really say he was having a bad time. As a prisoner, Escobar still had communications with the outside world. His operations were still running, and he knew what was going on. One might even argue that his prison sentence was more like witness protection, considering he was safely locked away from his enemies, who looked to do him harm and end his reign. A change of heart. The problem with Escobar was that he didn't have a limit. Once he became this larger-than-life figure, it was hard to just slow down and reduce his hold on his criminal enterprise or nefarious dealings. Escobar had ordered the murder of 2 cartel members, and word traveled fast. A year into staying at the glamorous prison, the Colombian government somewhat reneged, or I guess reworked, the agreement, and decided it was time to send him to a real prison. Turns out some government officials weren't fully aware of Escobar's prison situation, and learning the truth put a sour taste in their mouths. There was one flaw in this plan. The agreement meant they couldn't remove him from the property. So instead, they improvised and sought to craft a prison cell on the property to stay in line with the agreement while stripping Escobar of his many privileges. As you can imagine, Pablo wasn't happy about this whatsoever. Nobody was up to the task of building his cell. The Bureau of Prisons was corrupt and inefficient, and private contractors point blank refused to work with Escobar on the property, deeming it asking for a target on their backs. So, they decided they'd take Escobar down from the mountain. Hell breaks loose at Hotel Escobar. It was July 1992, and the Colombian National Army's 4th Brigade surrounded Hotel Escobar with the Vice Minister of Justice in tow to remove Escobar from his luxury prison. They were armed and ready to go, but lowered their weapons at Escobar's request. It was when Pablo took the Vice Minister of Justice hostage that everything took a turn, and all hell broke loose. Men were killed and injured, and Escobar would escape their clutches with little effort. It was a real slap in the face, considering these men had been highly trained by the United States Delta Force and were equipped to handle the situation, yet somehow were outsmarted by a single person. Escobar managed to escape and evade capture for over 16 months. But everything good must come to an end, and Escobar's freedom and life would be cut short when he was shot and killed, ending the reign of Colombia's legendary drug lord and king of cocaine. Pablo Escobar's story is one of ambition, excess, and destruction. He built an empire that changed the world, but at an unimaginable cost. While his death brought an end to his reign, his legacy continues to fascinate and horrify, a cautionary tale of the devastating outcomes of unchecked power. So, what do you think about Escobar's 5-star prison? If you were given the chance, would you go for it? Well, it's definitely a tempting offer, but you must also consider what the devil paid for his luxurious prison experience in the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories like this. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious. And remember, what may seem like a paradise could end up being your personal hell.